Hey, my name's Scott and I'm a food photographer based in the UK. Today I'm going to go through the camera and lenses that I use in 2019 to produce my work. And then after this I'm going to record a second video which is going to go through how I got to this stage with my equipment. Because what I'm going to show you now is reasonably expensive. It's not the most premium stuff, but it's out of most people's price range, and it was certainly out of my price range 10 years ago when I started. So if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get a notification about a week showing you the new videos here, hopefully. And we'll go through all of that. But for now, we're going to look at the equipment I have in front of me. We're going to start off with the camera body that I'm using for my main shooter, and this is Canon's 5DS. Now, this is what I use for 75% of my work-ish. That's a pretty plucked out of the air number. But for the rest of my work, I use a Phase 1 camera, which I don't own. We rent that. We rent it from the Flash Centre over in Birmingham and London, and their cameras are phenomenal. The lenses are amazing. But that's a little bit out of my price range at the moment. Maybe in 10 years time I'll be doing another video going, look at my Phase 1 cameras, this is what I used to shoot with. But for now it's the Canon 5DS, and I chose this camera purely based on the resolution. And the reason for that is, before this, for 10 years I shot with Canon 5D Mark IIs, which are brilliant cameras. And if I didn't need the resolution, I'd still be shooting on these, because as far as I'm concerned, there's been no major leap from here to here in any of the iterations of the 5D series. Now, there have been things like improved autofocus, and you've got the dual card slots, but I don't use any of these things. My camera sits on this massive tripod. Hang on, I'm looking at the screen. This way. Over here. There we go. It's in manual focus. It's tethered straight to this computer over here. I don't use any of the fancy functions. All I use is the sensor, and this is a light-proof box. So, as far as that goes, it's brilliant. I use the ColorX chart to get my color calibration as close to the Phase 1 as I possibly can. And then, yeah, brilliant camera. Tethers really well. Had a few issues with the 5D Mark II tethering, but I think I was mostly down to Adobe rather than the actual camera. Since getting this, I upgraded to the Capture One software. Now, the Capture One software it opens the RAW files up differently. They look better. If you've got a camera at the moment, you're going, I want a slightly better image. Download Capture One and look at what your files look like in there. It'll be like buying a camera upgrade. Definitely worth doing. Now, lens-wise, on here at the moment, I've got the 90mm tilt shift, which does all this cool stuff, and this cool stuff. And this is what I use most of the time. It lets me deploy something called the Scheimpflug principle, which I'm sure I'm saying wrong because I've only ever read the word. I've never actually heard anyone else say it. But this allows me to control the depth of field in a way that a standard focal plane length does not. This is how we get the images we need for our clients. When they go, we want it in focus front to back, and you're thinking at f/22 from this distance, not going to happen. How did that other person do it? Doing this. These lenses are absolute gold. You need to go and learn how to use them. Rent one, buy one, borrow one, whatever you need to do. Invest in one of these. If you currently own a 50mm lens and nothing else, the next lens you should buy is a 90mm tilt shift lens. It will work as your 100mm macro with a small extension tube, and it's just something that you really need to know if you want to have the edge on your competitors. So following on from that, the next lens I have is the 45mm tilt shift, and I don't use this in the same way. I don't use it to get the increased depth of field, because it's rare that I would need it at this focal length. What I do use it for, though, is to cheat medium format, or to help myself out in a tight spot. So some of my clients insist on shooting on location rather than in here, where we've got like a kitchen and everything set up to go. And it means that we don't have 15-foot high ceilings. So I've often got my camera here, and I'd need a 24mm lens to get the whole shot in, which is what I'm shooting this on right now. But with this 45mm lens, if I take a shot in the middle, shift the lens over, take a shot at that side, then a shot at that side and stitch it together, I'll get to have the lens at a more reasonable height and still get that 45mm perspective. That is very, very useful. Likewise, if I'm doing some sort of environmental portrait and I want a bit more depth to it, I can shoot this at 2.8, have the subject in the corner here, go to the center, get another shot of the background, and here for another shot of the background, and it'll really give me a nice, deep looking image, a really 3D sort of image. Putting the camera into portrait orientation, then sliding the lens across will give you a landscape image. Or you can go for a really long, skinny panoramic. There's not really much use for that in my line of work, but brilliant lens, great optics, great colors. I've not had this one for too long, but I'm pretty impressed with it. It's very good. My next lens, which is a little bit specialist as well, is a 100mm macro, and this one here is the Zeiss Milvus Macro Planar f2 100mm. This is a thing of beauty. It's got beautiful focus rings, very smooth, got a metal lens hood that you don't need, but it feels nice. And it's generally just built really well, but the optics in this are amazing. I had the Canon version before this, and this is so much better. It's night and day. It's like going from a kit lens to a prime for the first time. It's a bit expensive and it doesn't have autofocus, but it does have AF assist beam. So when you do focus it, if you've got an autofocus point in there, it'll do a little beep for you. It's a little bit too sharp for portraits, I find, on the 5DS. But on the 5D Mark II, it's pretty good for portraits. So very happy with this lens. Gets a lot of use whenever we're doing anything detailed, or we're going to pick something out of the shop. This is what we go for. Then we have the 50mm. This is a Sigma lens. This is the only lens in the bag I'm not happy with. The way the focus fall off occurs just isn't pleasing. It's a little bit too sharp. It's just not quite right for food. I'm sure it has its applications. As a wedding sort of lens, it's probably very good. But for what I do, it's not great. It's going to be upgraded to a Milvus lens from the Zeiss line as well. But for now, it does the job, and it has autofocus. It's one of only 2 lenses I have which are autofocus. So I don't use it much. When you're starting out, they say get a 50mm lens that's really versatile. It's actually probably one of the last lenses I purchased. But it's not very versatile in my line of work because we don't shoot versatile work. Otherwise, you'd go to a general photographer. We do more specialist stuff. But always good to have one of these in the bag. And then the last lens is my 35 1.4. This will be the lens that has been actually used the most over time. I've had it for about 7 or 8 years. Whenever it first came out, I bought it. It was the first premium lens I purchased. Before this, I bought the Gold Ring series of lenses like this H518. And in build quality terms, it's a massive step up. And in image quality, it's absolutely brilliant. This is great when we have to do environmental portraits, but I've also shot loads of flat lays, especially when I was starting out. So I started food photography. I had this Canon H518 and the 35-1.4, and that was it. And neither were really the right lens for the job, but for a few years I made it work. Did okay with it, still managed to make enough money to pay rent. But yeah, brilliant lens, thoroughly recommend it. But if you're a food photographer only, it's probably the last out of this group that you'd want to purchase, although I had it first. But there we go. Don't always make good decisions. So that's what I've got at the moment. And I'm going to put a video together later just to show you how I got here, because when I did start out, just buying the 51.8 was an expensive investment. So I'm going to sort of show and explain how I got from there to here without having, rich parents to fund me and, taking out a massive bank loan or getting it all on credit, whatever it may be. Because you don't need all of this to get going. You don't need it to make money. I was shooting billboard campaigns on a £200 lens on a 5D Mark II for years. Nobody ever complained. However, now my work's at a slightly higher level, and with that, slightly better equipment to be able to realise the image you've got in your head. But it doesn't, it doesn't make you a better photographer having this stuff, which is the main take-home message. But this is what I'm using in 2019, so let me know what you're shooting with, and hopefully I'll see you next week.